This is Father Noah Carter at Holy Cross Catholic Church in Kernersville, North Carolina. And 2 weeks ago, I was pleased to welcome my friend and colleague, Tyler Kramer, to a conversation about mental health during these days and weeks under the stay-at-home orders. And Tyler is a licensed mental health counselor in North Charlotte. Tyler, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
A couple of weeks ago, we spoke about a number of issues that are impacting mental health in our families, our parents, spouses, children, teens, and it was a very fruitful discussion. It not only has the interview been watched and downloaded over 1,200 times through our parish media outlets, but also Carolina Catholic Radio picked it up and has been running segments of it on and off for these past 2 weeks. And the producers there reached out and asked that we expand on our earlier topics. So thanks for making the time to join me.
Sure. Happy to be available. Absolutely.
Now that we're in phase one, beginning this evening of easing the restrictions that are in place here in North Carolina, there's kind of a growing light at the end of the tunnel, which I think is a really good thing. But many are still in kind of a state of mind where they don't have control over a lot of aspects of their life that are most important to them. And you mentioned in our last interview that some people respond by trying to take control in their homes, and sometimes this can come out through an overly overt and aggressive manner. And that's the fight mentality.
Right.
What would you say to those who respond to that lack of control with the flight mentality? So maybe it's not clinical depression like we talked about last time, but you have people that at this point just kind of, they lounge around. There's kind of a sadness there and a purposelessness.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the first thing that I want to say with that is that it's okay to feel how you feel, right? Because I think a lot of times people will sometimes think to themselves, there's something wrong with me, I feel this way, right? And when we look at stress or even just any type of experience of just negative emotion, usually there's a legitimate misfortune that we're experiencing that allows us to feel that way. And so the first step is to kind of demystify that there's something wrong with me because I feel this way, right? Part two of that then kind of comes into, well, do I want to stay this way? Do I want to stay here forever, right? And so we talked a little bit about the fight response last time. And when we look at flight, flight in a sense, there is avoidance with that, right? To almost kind of back away from a situation. And in a way, avoidance oftentimes will bring upon chaos, right? And that doesn't mean that avoidance is bad in all cases, but chronic avoidance, I like to kind of compare it to this mentality of sweeping things under the rug, which we sometimes hear with couples, right? And when we do that for a long period of time, we almost start to resent the rug, right? Because it becomes bumpy, we start tripping over it, we almost get angry at the fact that that rug's there. And when we go to replace it, we pull up the rug and there's all this there. And it's like, oh my gosh, what do I do with this? Mm-hmm. And so the key with avoidance is, I think we don't want to set up goals for ourselves that are unrealistic, right? That are not achievable. We want to set up goals that we can achieve each day. And I think that's the way to do it. So if we're avoiding something, maybe it's a big thing, break down, what can I, tackle today? Where can I challenge that avoidance in one small way today? And over time, that really helps people feel like they have more control and just more empowerment. Like, I am capable to handle this. And so that's what I would say on that.
Good. Yeah, we see that in the spiritual life as well. We call lukewarmness, where you look at all the things that are there, and it's not that you're necessarily inattentive, but you fear the effort of what it's going to take to get that done. And so you have to, in the spiritual life, also break down the spiritual exercises and the spiritual responsibilities into little things. The news has been dominated these days with the fast-growing unemployment numbers. So there's a lot of stress in that sector with the economy, but all the numbers, whether it's unemployment or just people out of work, add up to nearly 33 million Americans. And so, especially for those who provide for their families, it can cause them to feel like they're failures, and that they're not really doing what they should be doing for their families. Yeah. So what can you say to those who provide to their families in these days? Are there other ways that they can provide for their families other than just, bringing home the bacon, bringing home that paycheck?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually have a very interesting experience personally with this situation. So, when I went through the 08-09 financial crisis, I was, in my teenage years, and we actually kind of went through a few stages of less money, right? Less food, no gas money to go to school, and then eventually losing our house. And so I actually personally went through that experience of kind of dad struggling to kind of financially provide. And so as a child, I saw my dad kind of experience that. And the one thing that kind of stood out to me is that I think it's okay for it to hurt, right? I think it's okay for the family to not be comfortable in that situation because it's not a comfortable situation. But the difference there is that it's not about the failure, right? It's not even about the fact that something's going wrong, right? A lot of men look at this and so, how can I have failed? How can I let my family down? How can I not put this on the table? Children will see that, and that's important, but it's the moment afterwards that I think is really substantial. When a child sees their dad say, you know what, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep doing whatever I can. That changes them because they see that even when I am faced with tragedy or adversity, I don't have to give up. Like, I can still work towards it. In our own family situation, my dad's still working towards it. They haven't completely gotten out of the hole, but it's impacted my life tremendously. And so what I would say to fathers out there, you haven't failed, right? Tragedy is unavoidable in any circumstance. Right now is the perfect opportunity to teach your children that when things get tough, it's okay and that you can still move forward. And I would say that life lesson is so much more important than financial security.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And are there any concrete, practical ways within their family they can show that they haven't given up even when they're not going to work every day?
Sure. I mean, children are so observant, right? I mean, the idea of a dad just getting up and kind of following a routine or trying to work or spending time with the family, it's when a father really kind of says, you know what, I can't do this anymore, and they give up. That's what the children will see. And so there are these practical ways you can do it, but really I think what's more important is just that mentality, because we exude so much through body language. And so if a dad really is trying his best to love his children or to work or to make the best of the situation, that's all they need to do, because their children will see that in all these little ways that change who they are fundamentally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How about for a spouse, continuing affirmation and things like that in these times?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we talk about the marriage during the 08-09 crisis. What we've seen statistically is that marriages either got a lot closer or are really further apart. So you saw this tremendous increase of either really, really good, strong marriages or just separations and divorce, which is very sad, right? You know, during this time, it is difficult, and it's okay for there to be stress and to be some type of fighting in some capacity. But the idea is that if we are truly there for each other in terms of affirmations, support, even making breakfast, something really small, it goes such a long way. You know, I think for a man, and even for a woman, to compliment each other, right? To say, you know what, honey, it really means a lot that you're doing this, and honey, I really felt supported when you did this. That the law of affirmation is so powerful, and I would really just encourage, right now is the time for affirmation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we all need to be affirming each other in these days when there's so much uncertainty.
Mhm.
You know, to kind of turning back to our need for control and order in our lives, we're also creatures of planning.
Yeah.
We look forward on the calendar and we kind of say, well, what's this going to look like vacation, or this day, this week, you know, ahead or month ahead at work or within family life. And going into the stay-at-home orders, many, and this includes myself, you know, we saw it coming and we said, well, if I'm going to have a little more time and a little more freedom with timing and with the time, so many formed some grandiose plans. So some said they'd learn a new language, or they would do projects around the house, or they'd increase their prayer time, they'd spend more time with family, right? In the like, all these different things. And a lot then find themselves failing to follow through with those plans. And it can cause some to become really disappointed in themselves.
Yeah.
So what would you recommend in that sense, some good ways that we can improve our self-image when it seems like where we've set the bar maybe too high for ourselves, or even if it wasn't set too high, we haven't gotten there yet. So kind of improve that self-image and increase that can-do attitude during all of this.
Yeah, you know, there's a beautiful kind of saying that really kind of touches on this, and it's, don't compare yourself to who you should be. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday and do one thing today to change that, right? And so when we set goals for ourselves that are often unreachable, we can't help but not achieve them. And then we feel kind of upset with ourselves, or our shoulders go down and we feel like we can't move forward. And so the key is to define a goal that's achievable, right? And then to practically break this down. And this is even very good for children, right? To teach them, like, okay, we want to accomplish this thing. Let's break it down step by step by step, even daily. And when we can have a daily goal that's achievable, then it's something that we can feel like we can work towards. And, you know, humans oftentimes, we're not perfect, so we make mistakes. Even if we have all the right tools set up in place and we're even like well-intentioned, we can still mess up. But if we're seeing ourselves make maybe say 50%, right? Our goals are this week, we're going to achieve this, and maybe we hit it 50%. The idea is then next week, try to hit 51%. And at that 52%. And it's just slow incremental change. And that's what we find scientifically and statistically to be the most lasting and impactful change.
Hmm. The last question that I have, Tyler, on the topic is on the topic of social media. So a lot of times that we can't gather together in the same ways that we are. Maybe some people, who can gather together, right? Groups attend, socially distance, things like that. But certainly we are not as free as we have been in being able to gather with friends and such. So I've seen a spike in the amount of time people are spending on social media. I only try to check these things about once a day, just to keep abreast of what's going on. But I notice that some people, they're constantly interacting through the different apps and networks that are out there. But we've talked before, you and I one-on-one about the drawback of social networks and social media.
Right.
And that's the fact that the majority of people who use it share only what they want other people to perceive their life is like.
Yeah.
So how would you say we could use social media in ways that are prudent and responsible, that avoid the tendency that we have online to kind of fake it till we make it, of making everyone think that everything's okay, but really there's some decay there.
Yeah, the online persona. Well, it takes so much energy to even kind of keep up that persona, and then you kind of almost feel split all the time, which is a recipe for anxiety. I actually had a really interesting conversation with my wife the other day, and she was having a tougher week, right? She's a little more isolated because she's a new mother, working from home, these types of things. And one of the ways that she really can be connected with other people is through social media. And so she was finding herself spending tons and tons of times on Instagram to be connected, rightfully so, but also to go on Instagram. And she was kind of falling more and more into a slump. And yesterday she was extremely happy. And she's like, I finally deleted Instagram off my phone. She still has it on her computer so she can stay in touch. And I was like, Karen, what would you say is the difference, right? Scale of 1 to 10. And she was like, honestly, like an 8 to a 9. And I'm like, oh, that's crazy. Because for us, if we see a change at like a 4 or 5, that's huge. An 8 to a 9 is drastic change. And so the idea is that I think some people really spend so much time on social media that they get lost in it, right? They lose themselves. And unfortunately, Instagram is notorious for, they call it Instagram reality, right? Or it's not actually true. And you can see them photoshopping their bodies and constantly. And so you always kind of get this message on Instagram, either that someone's life is better than yours or that you're not enough. And when you hear that constantly throughout the day and you're stressed and you're isolated, how could you not feel more depressed or anxious or any capacity of that? And so the key is use it for connection. But that temptation, just go on your phone and click it and see like, oh, what's on Instagram now? That's going to get you in trouble. So set some time where, all right, I'm going to connect right now. Do that. Go on the computer or whatever, even on your phone. But when you're kind of just on board, click, scrolling, that's where you're going to get into trouble.
Yeah, it's interesting to see the different ways that people in these days are finding new or going back to old ways of coping. And some of those are good things, and some of those can be self-destructive in the long run. And social media can be that way for some people who have a trouble, turning away from it. And I spoke recently with a parishioner who, found themselves kind of getting lost, not necessarily in social media, but just reading and online things and, wanting to be informed all the way. And they said, I just don't know how to turn away because I don't have the strength to do it. I said, buy an egg timer. and when you hop on the computer to check the news, set it for 15 minutes. And when it goes off, turn the computer off. Otherwise, it can just become so weighty. It's like a weight that we shouldn't have to carry around.
Yeah, and there's apps that help you kind of track your screen time, these types of things. It's tricky, I mean, because there is a dopamine rush when you're on and you're scrolling, but what we have found, and kind of consistently, is that more screen time is correlated with higher levels of depression. And so connection isn't a bad thing, it's a beautiful thing, but it's that kind of like, I'm bored, and then you start scrolling. That's where there's not really meaningful connection. That's where we have more opportunities to kind of look at, oh, this person's working out more than me, or oh, they have a better body, I wish I looked like this, or oh my gosh, I wish I went on that vacation. And you just start to kind of like see your life as not enough. And I think that's really sad. That's tragic almost.
Well, that brings up another point of when it comes to parents monitoring their children's electronic time
Mhm.
is that a parent told me recently that they let their kids play video games, but it's only for a time. It's not
Mhm.
this whole thing where they can say your 20 minutes are up or whatever it is. Your 20 minutes are up, and they never allow their children to say, well, let me finish this level, or let me
Yeah.
finish this chapter, or let me
Mhm.
finish, because then they're going to move into the next and ask
Mhm.
for more and more extension. So is there a healthy balance there from a mental health perspective? Because you brought up the fact that there's a correlation between screen time and depression and things like that. But is there a good way for parents to interact with their kids who are using electronic things, whether it be social media or video games or such, that they can limit it but not be the tyrannical parent?
Sure, absolutely. It's a very, very difficult question, and it's tricky, and I'm actually probably going to give answers that maybe other people wouldn't give, but I think there's some merit to this. And what I would say is that the law of affirmation, right, is very, very applicable in this case. And so children sometimes like to rebel against like discipline or boundaries, especially in your teenage years. That's almost a stereotype. And so the way to not kind of go around that, but to kind of encourage behavior that you like to see is when they put the video game down, especially if they're going for a long time, like, hey, I really appreciate you spending more time with us. Because in that way, it doesn't tell them that what they're doing is wrong. It tells them that the choice that they just made is more correct. And so it's a very, very kind of interesting shift, but it has so much power. And so if you really want to encourage your children to go outside more or to spend more time with the family, every time that make that choice to do that, tell them immediately, like, wow, I really appreciated that you sat down and had lunch with me. Because children love that. I mean, we love that. Men love that. Women love that, to be affirmed for something that they do. And we desire that. We desire that connection. And video games, I would say, are a very helpful tool when they are used as a tool, right? Because for men, I think I talked about this before, but they interact with each other side by side time. So it's doing something together, right? And so if you use a video game or any type of media or electronic as a way to connect, then that's powerful. If we use it as a way to kind of escape, then in moderation, that's okay, kind of unwinding, right? That's the appropriate use of that. But to run away, that's avoidance and that's chaos. And so if parents, for example, like to play a racing game with their kids and they'll play 10, 20 minutes, then that's a beautiful father-son or mother-daughter or whatever bonding time. But if it's just chronic isolation, then that's where you lose that potential for connection.
Yeah, that idea of affirmation was, I think it was a Swedish business owner. I saw this on, go figure, social media a couple of years ago, where he was talking about he was applying how he learned parenting skills with his manager style within his business.
Yeah.
And he said, we never tell our son, you're a good boy
Mhm.
or good job. We always say, I appreciate the effort.
Mhm.
And look at what happens when you put that much energy into it. So he does the same thing with his staff as well, of always appreciating the work they put into it,
Yeah.
and not just exclusively the result. That way you're affirming the person and not just their product.
Right. And we see that so much with men, right? Because men almost put their identity in what they do. And so a way to kind of teach your children how to almost avoid that curse is to affirm them for who they are and also what they do. Because doing good things is still a good thing to do, right? Which is almost a tongue twister there. But it's important to affirm both. And a lot of men, especially right now, as finances are starting to tank a little bit for everyone, they see that as I'm failing as a man. And I would say that's further from the truth. We can't avoid tragedy. And really, I think what helps define a man is not the fact that he struggles with tragedy or even that he gets really inflicted by it, but it's what you do after, right? It's what you do after the fall that is so much more important than the fall itself.
Good, excellent. Is there any other, from what we've spoken about, or maybe your thoughts over the last couple of weeks? Everything changes, it seems, day to day. Anything that you want to say to the people who are listening and watching?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have to, unfortunately for me, I have to watch the news and kind of keep in touch with everything for my profession more than I would like to. So one of the studies that has come out is that you're seeing higher impact, right, with mortality and just even more severity in illness with vitamin D deficiency. And what's really interesting is it's not an encouragement for everyone to go out and start taking vitamin D supplements. It's actually quite the contrary, right? Is that you see vitamin D really, really impact us when we're outside. And so this isn't an encouragement to break social distancing, but there is so much merit and being able to get outside, just even if it's in your own backyard or going for a walk somewhere. Because what we see is when we have more vitamin D, more sunlight, depression starts to decrease. And we really start to see people feel more positive, that they can, really tackle the world and move forward. And another thing that you can take, right, is fish oil. It's something that, I really actually will kind of stand behind, is that fish oil allows you to have more receptivity to the vitamin D that goes into your body. So if you're outside a little bit more and you start taking fish oil, that's something that you can practically biologically do. It's going to have a drastic impact on your mental health. You'll feel more confident, more capable, and you might even feel happier. It's just something small, but something so efficient.
So can you tell us, so what exactly chemically does vitamin D do that changes the way in which we that brings about a greater mental health?
Sure. So I'm not going to go into the crazy amount of science behind it, but essentially the serotonin, right? So when serotonin's low, we're more likely to be depressed, right? When serotonin's higher, we're more likely to feel confident that we can do something, but also we'll see less instances of depression, right? More capable. And so with vitamin D, that's one of the things that down the process line boosts the level of serotonin, right? And fish oil will do the same thing. And so they really, when you take them, when you work on that comorbidly, right, together, right, you're really going to see this change. And so that's something that I do personally, that I take fish oil. So I'm a big believer in it. We were actually taught at Franciscan as well. Professor, he lived by fish oil, fish oil, fish oil. And so it's definitely something that has scientific backing. The research is still coming out, but there is some merit to this for sure.
Good. Well, Tyler, I do appreciate so much you taking the time again to sit down with me, and we're virtually socially distancing by about 80 miles, I think. But continue to persevere. I know you have you're still seeing clients and such, so prayers for you and for your family and for them as well.
Thank you, Father, and likewise, thank you for all that you do.
Thanks.